Saddle up your horses.
Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast. We have a great show lined up for you here today. We are actually hoping to be joined by a very special guest. And it looks like he is hopping in now. Welcoming in the co-host of the Building the Broncos podcast with Nick Kendall, Mr. Carl Dumler, man. You hit that. You missed it by you missed the tea time by just a few minutes. You missed it.
You were so close to saying you missed it by
man.
that much. You missed an opportunity, Cam. Welcome, Carl.
It's true. You did. No. Hey, guys. Good to see you. Yeah, sorry, just a little bit late there for a second, but glad I could get to join you here tonight, and definitely an honor to get to talk some football with you guys.
Yeah, it's exciting because I mean, like, I think it's one of those we'll have the conversation a lot, right? But it's one where it felt somewhat like the same that the Broncos have had the last 8 years, right? But it's one that it's also understandable that you can very clearly see that there was some growth happening this year, you know, especially with Sean Payton at the helm. So I think it's easy to wrap yourself around this whole idea that, you know, it was definitely the same within the last, 8 years. But yeah, it's just a lot has transpired, right, Carl? Because I mean, like, the Broncos felt like they had the franchise quarterback with Russ. The season, as much as it was progress, right? It was progress in terms of better for Russ. Just the season in general, unfortunately, they just did not get to those playoffs. But they were close, though. And it was one of the most meaningful seasons in terms of Broncos, seasondom, if you will, for probably since 2016.
Yeah, I mean, you see that crazy stat that's been out there of the Broncos ended up beating, I think it was 4 playoff teams this year. Then they also lost to the teams that have the second and third pick in the draft. And so it was kind of one of those maddening things of you see that they can compete with the big boys, but they got to learn how to win consistently. Yeah. And obviously that comes with getting your quarterback position figured out. I mean, I think it's pretty easy to see the marriage between Sean Payton and Russell Wilson was not a good one at all. I mean, they made it work to a point.
Right.
But it just was never going to be this great thing that meshed perfectly where you see like a Drew Brees and Sean Payton, where like you can't tell one from the other because they just are on the same page on everything. Yeah. And so, I mean, that's going to be priority number one this offseason. I think the big thing for the Broncos that they haven't had in the past is they finally, for the first time, I guess you could argue, since Pat Bowlen was last actually like healthy and a part of the Broncos organization, this is the first time that they've had from one year to the next, same owner, same GM, same coach.
Yeah. And
I think that is going to pay dividends for this team moving forward. If they can get those three continued on the same page. I mean, I don't know if you listened to that press conference, all three of them pretty much said the exact same thing on almost every single subject. So you can tell, like, these guys have been communicating. They really have the same view of where they're going on a lot of things. And so I think that's going to be, like I said, pretty big for them. And if they can get that quarterback thing figured out, man, that's the top 4 things you need in football: owner, GM, coach, quarterback. The rest of it kind of just flows from there. You can get the rest of it figured out pretty easy. But if you get those 4 things, you can move mountains in the NFL.
So I will say, though, the one thing that interests me is it feels like there were some mixed reports on the GM side of it in terms of if George Payton is going to stick around, because at the beginning it was kind of felt like it was maybe not, because I think there was a report somewhere that it was discussed, and then there was like a report somewhere that he was safe, and then there's another interview where I heard some notable insider, I don't remember who it was, but I think it was Schefter or someone notable was like, I don't know if I'd say he's safe. So We'll see. It'll be interesting. I mean, I think he probably stays around, but I do think you can probably build a somewhat decent argument that he's not been good. And maybe he's the vice GM and Sean Payton takes over more, which would be interesting. But
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see kind of what happens there. But though I will say the one thing I wanted to kind of chime in there, Cam, about what you were talking about in terms of like it being a meaningful season. I think it was, but I think it was a meaningful middle of the season because it was like a very, oh no, here we go again, beginning of the season. And then it was like, holy crap. And then it was like, yeah. So more meaningful than maybe it's been. The bar was not high, but
yeah,
I think a divorce is coming in when we talk about the marriage. I mean, obviously he was benched, but there was some also reports recently that like Russ might come back, or he's
it kind of felt like damage control
coming back, which kind of felt like I can't tell how much of that is like just PR.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting end to the year, and I'm interested to see where it goes. But I will say, like, I am excited to go into an off season with no head coach search. Which I mean, I don't even know the last time I could say that.
Yeah. Well, and obviously we'll talk about just the coaching news in general, in terms of what happened today and yesterday.
Oh my God.
Because that was wild. I mean, just when you felt like you got maybe a curveball, of course, with what happened in Seattle, maybe the biggest curveball of a ball was not in the NFL, but it was NFL related. So we'll certainly be talking about that. I mean,
it could get even more curveball.
For sure. Yeah.
Because
do you just want to dive into it?
He's 72, but
do you just want to
Carroll
dive
has the
into
opportunity to do the funniest thing possible. Anyway,
we'll
talk about it.
Do you just want to dive into it now? We kind of done enough teasing, I guess, if you will, for it.
Let's do that first because that's more breaking news. Yeah. Holy shit.
So
that's all I have to say about that.
If anybody's not been following, basically,
if you live under a rock and you haven't looked at Twitter.
Well, to be fair, it happened today. So I'm just saying, like,
you haven't looked at Twitter. That's what I'm saying. If you've not looked at Twitter in the last 12 hours.
So basically, what happened is
for it.
This is not counting what happened yesterday, but Pete Carroll was the biggest shockwave of them all to get things kind of started. It surprised everybody. Like, Pete Carroll was out as head coach. Now, granted, I think the surprise in the statement was that he's going to be on. He'll stay on as an advisor. So he'll stay on as an advisor. But that was just the other curveball of all of it. And, of course, that ends up becoming, of course, this NFL ties, but it was actual, NCAA ties, and that was Nick Saban calling it quits, retiring from Alabama, shocking everything. And so I think it's curious because as much as we talk about the coaching carousel from the Jim Harbaugh perspective, I let's just start with that, because if you're Jim Harbaugh, this is the case where actually you now find yourself in the situation of you may not have just of the pick of the litter for NFL jobs, but you possibly have the opportunity to do the strangest thing. And I was joking when I was tweeting this, but you have the opportunity to do the strangest thing, which is be on Alabama's short list for possibly being their head coach. Because, like, Alabama, who knows what they're going to do with their candidates, but Jim Harbaugh could very well be one of the candidates that they interview. And Carl, for the head coaching, job down there at Alabama.
Yeah. So I met Nick Saban one time.
Oh, really?
He's down at
the story.
Yeah. So I went down to the Senior Bowl, and it's in Alabama. Mm-hmm. And he came to one of the practices, and he is short. I think he's
really
like 5 foot. Yeah, he's 5'6".
I would not have guessed that. I've never seen him not on a field or at a podium, and I just kind of can't tell. That's actually surprising.
Yeah. So
his
I mean, like I said,
is not.
No, that's the thing. So he's like the smallest guy there at this event.
That's so funny.
And yet he's like the biggest guy in the sense of everybody wants to go see this guy. Even all the NFL head coaches are like swarming to go be around Nick Saban.
That's nuts.
So when you're talking about some of the biggest personalities in all of football, Nick Saban has to be up there in the top 3 or 4, I'd have to say, if not number 1. And so this is huge news to see him retiring. Probably going to go down as the best college coach of all time. But I kind of get it. I mean, he's up there in his 70s.
Yeah. College
football has changed so much over the last 5 years. And so as coaches, you're having to learn a whole new way of how you're handling yourself. You're having to recruit them out of high school. Then you're having to recruit your players once you actually get them to stay with your team. And you're having to recruit from all these other teams with the NIL deals and all of the transfer portal things that are going on. And I think there's just so much more on a head coach's plate than there was before. And I'm sure for a guy like Nick Saban, he's just like, is this really worth all that energy I have to give into this to keep being at this kind of level? Alabama, they're going to be good. They're still going to have like their pick of the litter when it comes to whoever they want for head coach. I mean, I've even seen, I'm trying to think of all the different names. Washington's head coach, Jim Harbaugh. I've heard about him. Dabo Sweeney from Clemson.
I'm even thinking Steve Sarkisian as well, right?
Yeah. There's lots of names, lots of connections to Alabama. So they're not going to be hurting to find a coach that's going to keep them in the running.
So the thing that I alluded to before, and let me just preface this joke by saying that this is not happening, but it would be funny. What I was talking about before with Pete Carroll, which first of all, I think it's kind of weirdly ironic that they're both 72, and within the same day, one of them is out and the other one's retired. But the thing that would be funny is Pete Carroll, welcome back to college football. Pete Carroll just goes to Alabama. And now they have another 72-year-old head coach. Because for people that somehow don't know about Pete Carroll's history, before he was in the NFL, he coached in college. And actually, he kind of went back and forth between the two. He started in college and then he went to the NFL and then he went to USC for 8 years before he went to the Seahawks. So that would actually be hilarious. It's not happening. Let me preface this again. It is not happening, but it would be funny.
It would.
Yeah,
I would love that.
Just the visual picture of him being an advisor for the Seahawks and then still being the head coach of Alabama. I could just see it, just the stress level of it.
We got to go. It's the whole history repeats itself. Jim Harbaugh comes back to the NFL. Pete Carroll goes back to college.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, and obviously we should preface this that it also may not be one of the biggest dominoes to fall in terms of just the coaching cycle and the coaching circle in general, because, the other trio of this is who knows what's going to happen with Bill Belichick, right?
That's what I was about to say.
Yeah. Cause that's kind of the other trio of this is, he's had his weekly meeting, right? Or not weekly meeting, but his his regular end of the season meeting with Kraft, right? That's something that they said is that it's a regular meeting. But you wonder, the more this thing prolongs, if maybe he does stay. But also, there's another twist and another curveball of these whole coaching carousels, and that's what happened in Tennessee with what happened down there with letting Mike Vrabel go. Now, granted, you can kind of peel that back a little bit and maybe wonder if they just didn't handle that whole situation, and it wasn't maybe a case of let's do right by Vrabel and have him go to New England, but just that they just handled that whole situation wrong. But you do wonder, did Tennessee get tipped or something about this possibility that Bill Belichick may be out, and let's maybe do right by Vrabel and sending him off and potentially, being the coach for the New England Patriots, and maybe, ironically, having a reunion of sorts with Arthur Smith and Mike Vrabel down there in New England.
That would be nuts. Sorry, real quick. Let me just mention this, and then I'll let you go, Carl. The thing that to me that is interesting, just as long as we're on this, because the Bill Belichick thing, first of all, yeah, that's nuts. But the thing that interests me about, just going back real quick to the Alabama discussion, is I think I speak for probably most of Broncos country when I say that the idea of Jim Harbaugh coming to this division is horrifying, especially because of the Chargers. Please no. I mean, I know that the ownership is a mess and that entire franchise is, there's a reason we call it chargering, but that would scare me. But I will say with the Alabama news, like if you're Jim Harbaugh, I know he kind of wants to come back to the NFL, but you have a chance to go to Alabama. I can't tell which one is more appealing.
That's right.
But go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I would agree. I've had quite a few people message me about what do you think is going to happen with Jim Harbaugh? And I'm kind of going, well, if history serves to the future, if we keep looking at the past, how it's going to tell for the future. He's done this about 3 or 4 times in college where he says, oh, I'm going to jump back to the NFL. Mm-hmm. And then he's using it as leverage to get the next big contract to stay with Michigan. Mm-hmm. Or like I said, Alabama, I think that'd be pretty appealing. I think he loves the college game. He gets so much more control over the roster compared to what you can do in the NFL. He is top dog. He doesn't have to answer to an owner or a GM. It's him. I know he still has like college presidents and all those kind of people, but they're going to leave him alone to do his football stuff. And so unless there's like these major and Draft Time Broncos country, good to see you. What's up with you as well? But unless there's like these major penalties coming for Michigan for their different things that they've done wrong, I can't see him leaving the college game. Now, I could be completely wrong, and maybe it's just me hoping, like you said, that he doesn't come to the Chargers or to the Raiders. But like I said, I just think that control element of it is something that he just absolutely loves there in the college level compared to the NFL.
The control and then just the opportunity to go to a program like Alabama, first of all, 100%. The other thing, too, though, that I think factors into this a little bit. I mean, yes, Alabama has pretty much the pick of the litter, but tell me who wants to succeed Nick Saban. You know who probably is one of the few people who would be not fazed by that at all? Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah. Well, and, again, we could speculate all we want in terms of, names, but obviously the other one that certainly comes into, play, and it's the wild card for me, but it's like, what's going to happen with Kirby Smart, right? Because Kirby Smart was like the understudy, under Nick Saban, and we know that Alabama can, reel it in a little bit. So I think that, it's going to be curious to see what they do. But I mean, as we prefaced it before, like, obviously it's kind of funny how it has grown the last few years. Cause in terms of Harbaugh's like jobs, cause like in the first season, it was just, okay, he interviewed with the Minnesota Vikings, right? Basically like he interviewed with the Minnesota Vikings. And that was like, I'll kind of like put my foot out there, like saying, hey guys, I may be interested in the NFL. And then it became, hey, well, you know what? I might actually be seriously considering the Denver Broncos job. And there were a lot of people maybe that felt like the Broncos maybe really wanted Jim Harbaugh. And it was that 1A, 1B situation between Harbaugh and Sean Payton, and then just after all of that, he was like, you know what? I'll step back. I'll go back to Michigan. I feel like my loyalty, that was his word, like loyalty is to Michigan. And then during the season, or during near the end of the season, right, we are hearing some rumors and some rumblings that the Michigan Wolverines offered him a mega deal that had like the Willy Wonka fine print underneath it that had, please do not go to the NFL for like a year. I feel like it might be a little bit more than a year necessarily for like a mega deal like that. But that was the rumors. It was like a 10-year, what was it, like $120-some million deal. Like it was a mega deal. We don't know if he actually, well, I mean, obviously he hasn't signed it yet. It would be kind of stupid if he did turn that down, but going to this year though, he does have the appeal of jobs, like not just in NFL circles, but just even into the fact that Alabama is available. So it's crazy to think just in that time frame. So I'm curious to see what it turns out. I think as far as the pros, his best fit, and I don't know what's in his best interest, what he wants to do and his intentions. I don't know if he wants to coach the NFC again versus the AFC when he's competing with his brother. I don't know. But I think it would be interesting to see him maybe also somewhat into the same time zone, if you will, as his brother. So I think maybe an ideal situation for him, at least from my vantage point and how aggressive they've been, is the Washington Commanders. Because the Washington Commanders have a new owner. They're throwing everything, right? Funny enough, they were the ones that came in second to the Walter Penner Group, the Josh Harris and company. But like they're racking in a lot of like aggressiveness into that front office, and being aggressive and bringing a lot of resources into that department. So I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of took some of that same ilk of what the Walter Penner Group did and dipped their toes a little bit into Harbaugh. So I think as far as the situation, Washington would be rather appealing for me.
I mean, it's talent-wise, it's a team that is really missing quite a few pieces in my estimation.
Yeah.
They do have a high draft pick, so obviously he can go pick his quarterback that he wants to build around. But we've even seen both NFL and college, a lot of his offense doesn't depend on this elite quarterback to make it run. Like J.J. McCarthy's been a good quarterback. But I was just telling one of my youth kids, we were talking about college football, and I said there's probably 50 other quarterbacks in college football that could have led that team to a national championship.
Yeah.
Just because they have a great offensive line, great running game, great playmakers. Like they just got everything around him to make J.J. McCarthy's job easy. It's why he's such a tough evaluation for the NFL, in my opinion.
20 years old, only 20.
Right. And, we saw, especially as the season wore on, like early on, they let him throw a lot more. When they got to the tougher games, they kind of took the ball a lot more out of his hand and really turned it into a run game, throw when we have to kind of thing. So, yeah, I think Washington would be a decent job. Just like I said, you got owners who are willing to spend. I think they've got, like $80 million in free agency spending that they can do. So they can go out there and get a lot of players to add to that roster. And like I said, having 3 picks in the top 40 because of that Montez Sweat trade that they made early in the offseason, or here about midseason. So there's some things that they can do. I always have a tough time with Washington just because it's Washington. Like they've not been a great program for a long time. And I have to try to remember, like they've got new ownership, new things going in a different direction. But I'm not sure exactly how much he'd like that. I still think Chargers are probably up there for him just because, one, you got Justin Herbert. I mean, that's always going to be a big selling point for any team out there. You've got a top 5 pick that you can go out there, really add to this roster wherever you want. You've got some nice pieces, both veteran and young players that you can really build this team around. So I'd still put the Chargers up there. They've got some cap stuff that they've got to get figured out. But otherwise, I would say that they're in a pretty good place as well.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say, though, I feel like that is the other fairly large selling point is like you touched on it. He doesn't need an elite quarterback. But if I'm him, I'm like, I can't help but think, what can I do if I have one?
Right.
And I'm sorry, but I mean, Justin Herbert is an elite quarterback. Like you can say whatever you want. And I'm sure there are people that have made arguments because of what's happened in the playoffs and just his Chargers career in general, but it's also the Chargers. Like that's kind of just what they do. Though I think Josh does make an interesting point. Like, not the thing that what Josh said brings up for me is just the one, I think, hindrance in any of those major names going to the Chargers, and that's Spanos' family not paying for them.
Yeah.
Because they are notoriously cheap.
Yep.
So
and even if we're going to bring it back a little bit too, I don't know, and you guys can help me on this. I don't know if their family situation, much like what the Bolins had with their situation, I don't think that's been resolved either, as far as the family strife that's been going on, with Dean Spanos and that's family. I don't think that's been resolved at all. So, I mean, I would rather, if I was Harbaugh, now, I think that the thing that makes it appealing to is like Michigan. He played for the Chargers, right? He played for the Chargers. So I would maybe think that it would be appealing from that vantage point, but I don't know. I just can't see him going to a place that is unstable in that regard, right? Because I think of San Francisco, it was rather stable, right? With what he had there in San Francisco. So I would think he would want to go to, place that that he can kind of basically mold it as his own, if you will, right? And I don't know if, given some of their cap issues and maybe some of the stuff that they have down there, I don't know if that would be as appealing, if you will, aside from the quarterback position.
Yeah, I'd say the cash problem, like you said, is probably the biggest issue with the Chargers. It's why they don't have Sean Payton right now, because he wanted $20 million a year, and they're like, we're not paying that for a coach.
Yeah.
And so if they're not willing to pay that just for the coach, let's say Jim Harbaugh says, hey, I need these 10 players in free agency, and they're going to cost this much. And he says, you can have these 3, but the other 7 we're saying no to.
Well,
is he going to be okay with that? Yeah, Harbaugh's not going to handle that well.
First of all, no, he will not be okay with that. Second of all, I mean, Harbaugh himself, even if he takes a discount, I can't imagine he's costing you less than $10 million a year.
Yeah.
And that's a conservative estimate. And I know, like, technically staff doesn't count against the cap, but it's not the cap. Right. It's that they don't have the cash, or even if they have the cash, they aren't willing to spend the cash.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll see.
And furthering that point just a little bit too, is like, if you think back to maybe what the rumblings were for what the Broncos would have to pay for Harbaugh, it was somewhere in between like the 12 to 15 range, right? So, I mean, like, it was the 12 to 15 million. And now that he actually finds himself as far like a more appealing candidate, he may actually find himself in the Sean Payton range, which is that near 20 million a year, because of the simple fact he did win that national championship. Like, the fact he won the national championship is going to significantly increase the ability of a deal that he is going to get because of that. And so, so I don't know. I don't know if the Chargers are going to be that team. As far as the other coaching carousel moves, I mean, obviously those dominated a lot of it, but what were some of the biggest head scratchers? Obviously, we touched briefly on Mike Vrabel.
Mike Vrabel was the initial surprise to me.
Yeah.
And then it was promptly blown out of the water by today for good reason. But I definitely was not expecting Mike Vrabel to be gone. And I do kind of think that was a mistake by Tennessee. Carl, what do you think?
Yeah, I've been a big Vrabel fan for a long time. I think he's done well to maximize what that team can do with the talent that's on that roster. Like, I would
There's
put
not
them
much
as
talent on that roster.
No, at best, while he's been there, they've been a middle of the pack in talent level, and he's gotten to the playoffs almost every single year that he's been a head coach. Now, obviously, the last couple of years it's been a little bit rough, but there again, when you don't have a quarterback, it's tough to win in this league consistently. And then Derrick Henry's been hurt. So there's just been some major pieces missing there that weren't missing before. And so, Vrabel, I said right after he got fired, I'm like, I think Sean Payton should be going to that guy saying, what is it going to take for you to come to the Broncos staff some way? But I'm pretty sure actually he's probably going to go get another head coaching job.
Yeah.
Just because he's so well respected around the league. And I don't think there's a whole lot of great candidates out there right now that I can really think of, unless Bill Belichick gets fired. And then of course that opens things up big time.
But even then, like, it was pretty clear. Well, okay. I don't want to go down this path, but I feel like you wouldn't be amiss. And I'm not saying Bill Belichick isn't one of, if not the greatest, like, NFL head coach of all time. Yeah. But I do think when Tom Brady left, you did kind of get a bit of an answer to is it Tom Brady or is it Bill Belichick?
Right.
And I think it was more Tom Brady. And I will say, speaking of Belichick, because Mike Vrabel, he's not technically from the Belichick tree because they didn't coach together, but he played for him. He's by far the most successful coach from that tree, because we're not going to bring up the Josh McDaniels thing. Basically, every time a coach tries to go from the the Bill Belichick tree and make another New England culture, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And Bill Belichick, it has been interesting his time without Tom Brady. There was a quote earlier this week. Somebody said that players respected Bill Belichick because they could see the smarts that he brings to the table, but it was Tom Brady that they were willing to run through a wall for. And, that's why those two were such a great pairing, because you had intelligence at the coaching position, but you had the passion and the guy that just got everybody on board on the same page, working hard, in Tom Brady. And when he didn't have that voice in the locker room, you could tell that he lost things moving forward. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he goes. And I think Sean Payton's a little bit the same way. You know, when he had Drew Brees, he could get the locker room on his side. So he's got to get that quarterback that gets everybody else going along. Sean Payton's a smart guy. He can call a game better than 99% of the people out there. Mm-hmm. You know, there's only a few offensive minds that I'd put ahead of him, but I don't think he's always the best at relating to people or getting players on his side. That's not really his style. He's gonna win you over with how hard he works and how smart he is. And go ahead.
No. I think you're spot on. I think that we saw that in the press conference. Like we saw that in the end of the season press conference a little bit. And why do I bring that up? Because I feel like the media, it's interesting. It was interesting seeing the media do like their interviews of Sean Payton, George Payton, and Greg Penner. Like it was pretty obvious who they felt the most comfortable in asking the questions to. In terms of Sean Payton, George Payton, and Greg Penner, it was pretty obvious it was George Payton and Greg Penner, and for Sean Payton, like they were kind of scared a little bit, right? Like they're kind of scared a little bit as far as, you know, Sean Payton and you know, maybe some of the questions, or, you know, can we really ask this question, or, you know, if we ask this question, you know, if we ask it again, are we going to get shunned? Which did happen a few times, like. You know, in the Sean Payton, you know, pressure was someone asked the question and then they asked the same question just a little bit of a different way. So I think that's kind of the side of it, Carl. It's like, you know, there's just a side of them that just maybe, you know, it kind of rubs people a little bit, maybe the wrong way a little bit, or they're still getting adjusted from the Broncos media perspective, you know, to his game.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And so, yeah, I don't think the Tennessee job is a great one. Again, you're missing your quarterback there. I don't think they have a whole lot of great pieces on that roster. I guess I'll ask you this question just because we were talking about Seattle earlier with Pete Carroll. Yeah. So a week ago, they were saying, yeah, Pete Carroll's coming back for another season. And now this week, or obviously today, all of a sudden, oh, no, he's not going to be here anymore. Or well, he'll be an advisor.
Yeah.
What happened in this last week to go from he's coming back for next season to this?
Yeah, I think that's the question, right? And no one, I don't know that answer, right? Like I don't know that answer as far as, you know, how things transpired. Did some things get sour, right? Like did some things get sour in terms of maybe contract talks, right? Like that's the only like logical one that I could possibly think of is like, were they having contract extension talks to make him end his career as coach with the Seahawks, and then the things go sour, which I guess like for me, it's almost like, why would things go sour if that was the case?
Well, here's the only thing I can think of, you know? Is maybe they were trying to do that. And like, I mean, this doesn't even make sense, but this is the main thing I could think of. And I'll explain why it doesn't make sense after I say it. But I feel like there may be some kind of a scenario here where they're trying to maybe do the contract talk extension, or they're just having a conversation with him about the future or next season, and he gives them I don't know how much longer I want to do this, and they're like, okay, well, we don't want to, you know, if he's like, well, maybe next year is my last year, they might be like, well, let's just like cut the cord early, stay on with the organization, we want to keep you around, but we'll give you the opportunity to kind of back away a little bit if that's what you're wanting, and we'll start early on your replacement. I mean, obviously, I don't know if it would go exactly that way, but he might have given them I might be close to retiring phase or explanation for like how he views the future. So you never know. I mean, he's 72. Bill Belichick's 71. Although I will say, for a 72-year-old guy, Pete Carroll by far has the most energy of any 72-year-old coach that I've ever seen. And maybe even just 72-year-old person in general. But yeah, so I don't know. Maybe that happened. You never know what happens behind closed doors. Maybe ownership was tired of it. Maybe like, well, you've won one Super Bowl. We're tired of not making it far in the playoffs or making the playoffs. Like, I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah. I wonder a little bit, kind of like you said, maybe in that meeting, they were discussing a few maybe of his coaching staff. And he said, no, I want these people around. And ownership was like, no, they haven't been performing at the level that we want. And I know Mike Shanahan had a couple times of that. Gary Kubiak had a couple times where they were like, hey, we think this is a weak area. We need you to find a better replacement. And they pretty much said, if you tell my guy to go, I'm going to. Mm-hmm. And so I know that happens sometimes. And you get into those battles of who ends up winning the negotiations on those kind of things. But no, I just, like I said, it was just fascinating to me to see that go from 1 week ago, them talking like, oh yeah, he's definitely going to be back for another season, to now all of a sudden I'm stepping away or stepping into this other role, I guess you could say. And I'll be interested to see how much he actually is an advisor, how much he's actually there. Yeah. It's a little bit kind of like John Elway, where
I was going to say
when he first started, Elway was all in at being GM and vice president and all those kind of things. And then as the years went on, he was just like, I kind of want to go golfing. I want to hang out with my grandkids. And they just talked about how he is in the building like half of what he was when he first started with the Broncos that second time around. And I don't blame him. I mean, you just get older and it is a grind to be in that building day in, day out, putting in hours from sun up to sundown, and sometimes not getting the results that you want, and you just kind of lose that passion. So I guess just continuing in this conversation, which coaching job do you think is the worst of all of them that are open?
I would have to think Tennessee. Like I would have to think Tennessee. Well, I would say
that are open now, or that are expected to be open.
Open now, probably.
Let's go. Let's just stick with open now.
Yeah, because I would say it's probably a tie, and I would tie to a certain degree, but I would say Tennessee and Carolina. Those are probably the two that I would probably, go towards. Obviously, Carolina, it seems like we may have a new Dan Snyder in town. I mean, that's quite the accusation, but it seems like we have a new Dan Snyder in town, and that being down there in Carolina with Dave Tepper. So, I mean, I will tend to go there, especially considering, and it's crazy to think that, the longest tenured coach the Carolina Panthers ever had is now the head coach of the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Like, just as far as within the last few coaches that they've had, like, it's just, it's crazy. And so the fact that now they're rolling through head coaches, and Frank Reich was actually fired and let go faster than Nathaniel Hackett, is even crazier. So, like, just the whole situation of way things transpired, I actually don't even mind the fact that they took Bryce Young. It's just the fact that now you even made your entire roster even less appealing now. Like, and you now even have a situation and team that is going to be hamstrung for quite a few years because of that trade. You don't have draft capital for quite a few years. The money and the cap space is not great. Like, it's not great at all, which is funny because Tepper is one of the most, expensive and, owners, if you will, in the NFL, which is kind of funny. But like, when you have just the type of, from top to bottom, the way it's been, it's not appealing. It's not appealing at all. And then, of course, then you get to Tennessee and the way they handled the whole situation, even starting from the simple trade of A.J. Brown. Like, the simple trade to A.J. Brown, which kind of started it all. From there, it just kind of went from there to just the whole handling of, we might actually trade you, meaning by Mike Vrabel, but, oh, you know what? We decided not to trade you. So I'll tell you what, we're going to actually go ahead and move on from you and actually let you go. Like, that's just such a toxic relationship right then and there. So something had been a mess between even Vrabel and that general manager for quite some time. So those are the two jobs for me.
What about the Raiders?
The Raiders are up there. I was also going to say Carolina because of
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the ownership situation is why you put Carolina clear at the bottom. And, like I said, they traded that number 1 overall pick that was a great one for Chicago for DJ.
Yeah.
For all of this that's played into this, but Oakland or not Oakland, sorry, Las Vegas. They're always going to be Oakland to me. It's hard to get past that, but I think they have maybe of all the openings, maybe the worst quarterback situation. I mean, Aiden O'Connell right now would be your possible starter heading into next season. Obviously, they can draft one. They can go into free agency. I think they don't have a great owner either. When we're talking about cash availability, Mark Davis might be the poorest owner in the NFL. I mean, that's still staying like I live in a mansion and can do whatever I want. But in NFL terms, they are very, very cash poor as a team.
In Vegas, mind you.
Yeah, of all places.
Yeah.
And so I think there's going to be some limitations on what you can do with that roster. You also think of AFC West, where obviously you got the Chiefs who have just been dominating. Chargers have their quarterback figured out. Broncos have maybe a top 10 coach that can, if he gets his quarterback, wouldn't take too long for them to start moving up as well. So I do think that Raiders job is going to be not as appealing as what most Raider fans would be hoping. Now, obviously, they could stick with Antonio Pierce, and I think that would be their best move if they're looking at who would be willing to come to that job. I think he's done a great job in the few games that he got. Seems like players really wanted to play for him. But again, they've got some contracts that they've got to get figured out. They're a very top-heavy, talented roster. I mean, you got Colton Miller, who obviously I think is a really good left tackle for them. You got, I'm trying to think of who all they even have. It's just taking me a second here. I think Devontae Adams. There we go. Sorry.
I was going to say Devontae Adams, but who knows how long is he going to be there? And then Josh Jacobs is a free agent.
He's a free agent. They took Tyree Wilson, he's an athletic freak in the draft this last year, but he's not a finished product by any means. Mm-hmm. Didn't have a great rookie season. I would say he's got a long ways to go to being what you hoped for when you took him that high in the draft.
Well, that's the other thing is they don't draft well at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now let's switch gears a little bit to the other part of that conversation real quick before we dive into our other conversation. Do you see a job opening up? Do you see a job opening up in terms of a team that is, maybe in the playoffs or they've not made that decision yet? Because there's a few
not
teams
in the playoffs, but the Patriots would not be on my high on my list of desirable positions, and not just because you're replacing Bill Belichick.
Oh, yeah.
I just don't think I'd put it above Carolina in terms of
worst,
but it's up there.
What about you, Carl?
Oh, it's terrible. I mean, the only saving grace of that job right now would be that you have a top 3 pick in the draft.
Right.
So you can go get your quarterback, but you have maybe the worst weapons in all of football. You don't have a great offensive line. You've got an okay running game. You're not going to have Bill Belichick there coaching the defense if that opens up. So what are they going to be defensively? Because I think he does a great job of maximizing talent. Mm-hmm. Even if they are an average group, I think he can always get them to that next level of above average kind of thing. So yeah, they've got so many holes on that roster. You're looking at at least 2 to 3 year rebuild. And then you think about, again, the division they're in. Miami's going to be good for a while. Buffalo's going to be good for a while. So the Jets could be great if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy next
still
year.
Exists.
Yeah. And if they can get themselves an offensive coordinator that knows what he's doing, all of a sudden they can become a great team as well.
You guys,
so it's just
good. They finished the season ranked number 1 on defense and 32nd in offense. That's just so funny to me.
And Nathaniel Hackett.
I do think it's fairly obvious that probably Mike Vrabel's going to end up in New England, but you never know. It's that's the other one that that's why I asked available or will be available, because I'm fairly confident that that's probably going to be available, and I'm also pretty confident that it's bad. In terms of what is maybe a surprise, I'm not sure. Do you guys have any?
I do.
I'll let Carl go. Oh,
I,
you have a hot take?
okay.
Yeah, I do. I actually have two teams, but I wouldn't necessarily
I have
say
one
maybe a hot.
that is
And it
interesting.
would be Buffalo. This isn't necessarily a hot take, but I would
Okay.
say Buffalo. The way the season's gone, and the season just the way Buffalo needs it to go, this is a pretty desperate year for them. And the fact that they went on that losing streak, and if you will, and they kind of played scapegoat a little bit, if you're being honest, at that point in time, kind of giving it off to Ken Dorsey. And now they did turn the corner a little bit, but I can see Buffalo and Gage, to Gage's credit, he made this comparison on 5280. They could John Fox the situation. You go out and let go of Sean McDermott and you hire a much better coach or a younger coach, right? So and maybe in that situation, that's what it would appeal to a guy like a Ben Johnson, right? But the one that is the hot take, if you will, would be Nick Sirianni and the Philadelphia Eagles. I think that the Philadelphia Eagles, and I would just say if by sure happenstance they don't at least get to the NFC Championship game, there is a chance that Nick Sirianni is not coaching the Philadelphia Eagles next year. One, because of just everything that just sadly unfolded this year and the tail end of last season or this season, and two, Eagles fans. The Eagles fans are ruthless. So if they do lose to Tampa Bay or they don't even make it to the NFC Championship game, they will be calling for his head. Like they will be calling for his head. And it's going to sound ruthless, but like I can see Nick Sirianni being absolutely on the hot seat and they move on from him.
That was going to be my one.
Yeah, they have proven in the past that even if you've done great, like Doug Peterson, he goes out there and wins their first Super Bowl ever. And then what was it, like a year later, he's getting fired?
Right.
So I don't think that's ever happened before where you saw a head coach that does that well, and then they're already saying goodbye that quickly. I know they had some, and that was one of those things where like owner, GM were on one side and head coach was on another side of what he wanted for the team. And they were just like, yeah, we can't fix this. And so that's why they went a different direction. But still, Sirianni, like I said, kind of backed into the playoffs this year. Not looking like the team that everybody thought they were going to be, possibly getting back to the Super Bowl. So I guess it wouldn't completely surprise me, but it's still definitely, I mean, that's why it's a hot take.
Right.
You don't expect it to happen, but if there is a team out there that would be willing to move on quicker than other teams would, it'd probably be the Eagles.
Right.
Yeah, I was going to say that is my one. That would be maybe the hot take or the surprise, although I don't even know if it's a surprise or a hot take either at this point, because I've been fairly vocal in my belief they're kind of frauds. And they just keep proving me right. I'm sorry. I have a buddy of mine who's a huge, huge Eagles fan, and I am sure that he does not listen to this, but if you do, Tyler, I am very sorry. But your Eagles have a problem, and I don't know the solution, but I don't think the solution is necessarily Nick Sirianni. I don't know. We'll see. I do think that is the one that, like, yes, the team's in the playoffs, but they could have a new head coach.
So let me throw out one more that's not a firing. Let's say maybe a retiring. Let's say, and you guys might kick me off if I say this. Let's say the Chiefs go out there and win the Super Bowl this year.
Okay.
Could you see Andy Reid going, hey, I've done it. I've won a few Super Bowls. I'm up there in age. I'm ready to be done with football.
Bro,
because there's been rumors.
Yeah.
There has been rumors that he has been talking retirement in the next few years.
Yeah.
If Andy Reid and Travis Kelce retire after this season, I will literally throw a party.
like a mini Super Bowl party.
It'd be worth them winning it just to get those guys out of here.
Goodbye Chiefs party. Oh, I don't even 100%.
Yeah. That would be crazy too. Cause and even just from the standpoint of, if you're a Chiefs fan, you would be distraught considering how vulnerable you were this year. And so like how vulnerable you were this year. And so say you do go out and you do win the Super Bowl first, that would be impressive given the season that they did have.
Right.
But two, the fact that it would go out like that, man, that would be, I feel like that would almost be frustrating and bittersweet at the same. Like, mainly it would just be bittersweet because of that. Because it's like
Right.
we had such a rough season, but for it to go out like that, it's kind of like that conversation of like the we Broncos would have, and it's like, would you rather suck for 8 more years, but before that you won your Super Bowl almost. Like it's almost kind of like that same conversation. So, I mean, obviously Chiefs fans wouldn't trade it, but the fact that it would go out like that would be, it would be a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah. I don't expect it to happen because, one, I don't expect the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl this year. They're missing a few pieces that they've had in the past, unless somebody just steps up out of nowhere
And
that they haven't shown all season.
Yeah.
Rashid Rice becomes a top 5 wide receiver out of nowhere. But no, like I said, I've heard for at least the last couple of years, Andy Reid's been in that kind of mindset of maybe I'm ready to start walking away from the game. So it wouldn't surprise me if they maybe win something that he'd be like, that's good to go out on top.
Transitioning now as far as just changes in general, and it's obviously this is the good thing, is that the Broncos are probably going to have, and I shouldn't say probably, they will have changes in the horizon, but the good news is it's not going to happen to their coaching staff, and the only way that it actually happens with their coaching staff is if either Sean Payton views a certain upgrade at the defensive coordinator position. That would be certainly a coaching change, if you will. Or, of course, there's other people that are on that staff that get poached for a promotion. Christian Parker, right? Christian Parker being, a very popular one the last couple of years that could get poached for a defensive coordinator position. So I think that the Broncos are going to find themselves in obviously some change, but so much so that I think that the change is also going to happen on the player personnel side, like the player side of both sides. And we'll have the quarterback conversation in just a little bit, but there's other positions, there's other positions that are of need for this team, and Carl, for you, what is the most important need for this Denver Broncos team that's not quarterback?
Defensive line, interior defensive line. DJ Jones obviously did not live up to his contract. Very good chance that he's going to be gone.
Mm-hmm.
The other guys on the list, not great. I think the Broncos maybe set a record for a number of times defensive linemen were laying on the ground during a play. You got Jonathan Harris, not a great player. A lot of times teams really targeted him with the run game because he'd get pushed back 2, 3, 4 yards, and it was easy to run against him. You had your little bit of saving grace with Zach Allen. Thankfully, he was a very nice player for the team this year, but you need probably 2 more defensive linemen at least to make this a competent unit. I don't think they'd even if you found two good pieces, I don't think you'd even make it into the top 10. But if you can get into the top half of the league, I'd feel much better about this defense moving forward. Again, Matt Henningsen, he didn't take that step forward. Mike Purcell closed the season well, but he didn't start the season all that great. So it'll be interesting to see if he's going to be back. Elijah Garcia got some run, but again, I don't know how much he really brought to the table per se. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Broncos add at least 2 new defensive linemen. It might be the one area they really target in free agency, where they're willing to spend a little bit more compared to getting those bargain bin players. And it's definitely one position that needs a huge upgrade.
What about you, Brandon?
So, you could technically say that this is what you said, interior defensive line. So I'm going to say that this is different. I would say the edge group in general. It's been very, obviously ever since the Von Miller left, it's kind of been up and down and more down, to be honest. I just don't think you have a single person in that room, and I'm just going to be honest here, that is your franchise starting pass rusher or even starting pass rusher. I think they're all great. I think they're all great rotational pieces. I think specifically like Baron Browning, fantastic rotational edge player. Do I think he should be starting the majority of snaps? Probably not. Jonathan Cooper, same
say.
thing. I just think that you need a consistent pass rush, and you need a pass rush that people are afraid of. And I don't think we have that right now. And you definitely need the starter. You need the star pass rusher that takes the lead in that room and at that position and causes havoc. And it helps everything else. It helps out the other edge rushers because you have to figure out how to block your star. It helps out it helps out the interior defensive line because they can have a bit of reprieve. And I just don't think we have that right now. And what's also worse is I don't even know if there's someone in that position. Actually, I know that there's not someone at that position that I would take at our top pick in this draft at 12. Like, I just don't think that's the strength of the class.
Yeah.
And I'd have to look at the free agents that are available, but I think that should be more of a priority than maybe some people think.
What would you do with Drew Sanders this offseason? Because the Broncos,
I don't know the answer to that question because I don't even know if they knew what they were going to do with him this year. Like, I think I just don't think I could put any. He's kind of like a wait and see to me. Like, is he athletic? Sure. Do I think he could turn into something? Sure. Do I know for sure that he is something? No. And if I don't know that, then he's not the guy. And until he becomes a guy, he's not the guy. So you have to go find the guy. Like, I like him. I don't think if he was going to be the star edge defender, he would have been already.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, like, if they're going to play him inside more. I don't even know what position he plays.
I think that's the area where I'm very intrigued because we know that George Payton specifically has favorites sometimes when he goes through press conferences and names people by names. And I thought it was very interesting in that presser. He named 3 people specifically out of that, and they were rookies out of that class. It was Alex Forsyth, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later. Saying that he's a starter level player in this league, a 7th round draft pick, a starter level player in this league. And Riley Moss, a starter player, in this league. But he called Drew Sanders like high upside. Like he said high upside with Drew Sanders. I think Sanders finds himself in the Baron Browning conversation because like that was that kind of like the same type of player coming out, right? Like in terms of, people are throwing the same, type of style, which was the Micah Parsons type of style, right? Not necessarily comparing the two, but how twitchy and, just athletic of a freak they both are. And I think that the fact that I think it's going to be curious to see what the Broncos do. Obviously, to obviously shave off money, Josie Jewell is probably, he may go on elsewhere. Who knows? Obviously, Alex Singleton and him are very, very close. So you certainly can't rule, it out that he returns. And we all know that Vance Joseph was the guy who drafted him. I think people forget that. Vance Joseph, right? Wasn't he the guy that drafted him, or was it Vic Fangio? I have to go look at but like he
2018.
Was it 18? So
yeah. So
it may have been. So it was just after him. It was Vic Fangio. It was Vic Fangio's first year, if I'm not mistaken, is when he drafted him. So I think that, so I'm really curious to see, what happens there. Because if they do move on from him, then you're talking about a situation where they drafted Drew Sanders. So here's a chance where Drew Sanders is going to potentially be that starting, linebacker opposite of Alex Singleton. And so I think that he at least will offer you that. But I think that it's really important that this early in his career, you find that niche for him, right? You find that niche for him this early on. Because I think, and we all know this, that was one of the biggest things that maybe damaged Baron Browning's development early on was with the way that the Broncos handled that situation with him under Fangio. It's like, oh, we'll put him on inside, and maybe, kind of have him do it, like the inside linebacker spot, but maybe that may not be his best traits. And we kind of saw what he immediately was able to do once he was inserted as a pass rusher with a Jiro Evero, right? So I'd be curious to know, once they find that, but for Sanders, what that's going to entail. And as far as the edge rusher number one, I think, financially, I don't know how you can make it work, but there is one name. There is one name on the list, and he has ties to George Payton with his time in Minnesota, and that's Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter is a free agent in this offseason. I don't know how you can make it work, but he would be certainly one of the names that I would have on a short list if you can make it work to bring to Denver, and he would be your edge rusher number one. So,
yeah, there's a few other names out there. I was just looking at the list. You got Chase Young is going to be available as an undrafted free agent. Marcus Davenport, there's a guy that has connections to Sean Payton. Let's see, Leonard Floyd, he's up there in age, but he'll be a free agent. Josh Allen, probably going back to the Jags, at least on the tag, but if he hits the market, that could be an interesting one. I'm trying to think some others. Derek Barnett, Brian Burns from the Panthers.
Yeah.
He might be one to say,
he's going elsewhere. Yeah.
So, you never know. But no, I'm with you. I think I always hate when teams do this, of have players kind of going back and forth from position to position, especially early in their career. I'm like, their heads are already spinning with one position. Don't make them try to learn two and try to thrive at both of them. They did this with Justin Hollins when he first came to the Broncos.
Yeah, that's
was he an edge? Was he a linebacker? And I loved when he went to the Rams. They were like, "Hey, you are an edge player. That's what you are." And not that he became a great player, but he was solid. At least he was competent.
Yeah.
And so I feel like you got to do the same thing here with Sanders. Honestly, I probably think edge is his best position, just because it's a lot less thinking. It's more of just use your athleticism, go win. It's what he went to college for. It's what he did well at Alabama. And
you still have to think at the NFL level at the position.
You do.
The thing is, like, you can't just rely on the athleticism.
Right. No, you're right. But I think there's a lot more thrown at a off-ball guy compared to an edge guy, of where you're having to think. A lot of times, if you're an off-ball guy, a lot of times you're one of the play callers. You're getting everybody lined up, getting everybody in the right spot. It's probably why I'd bring Josie Jewell back if I can. If he costs a lot, then I'm going to say no. But if he's willing to come back on a decent contract, he's a decent player. I'm not saying he's elite by any means, but he gets everybody in the right spot. He's usually pretty smart on the field. This year he missed a few more tackles than I like, but I feel like that's a little bit more of a Vance Joseph thing, where he is actually coaching up a lot more of the strip sacks than past coaches have been.
Yeah.
And Vance Joseph is the one that drafted him, by the way. He was still here in 2018.
I was going to say, that was Vance Joseph's last year.
Yeah. So again, I feel like there's some trust there between those two. And it allows Alex Singleton to have a little bit more freedom to go roam and go make some plays for you. So, but again, that's kind of my thought of, I just feel like I would probably move Sanders to edge, just because it is such an important position that the Broncos are really struggling at, and just see if you can get a little something out of him.
But here's the thing, like, I'd move him to edge, but I'm still like, he's still not, I would do it as a
secondary,
as a
complimentary.
What's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah. Like complimentary secondary. I mean,
experiment. I would do it as an experiment. I don't know what I'm going to get out of him there. Like, I think he's going to be good, but I still don't think, like, if you're betting on everything, you're betting the house on him turning into your star edge player, you're probably going to lose the house. I'm going to be honest. Like,
I'm
could he? Could he? Absolutely. Sure, he can. He has that limit, that ceiling. But I just don't think, and I don't even know if free agency is the route I'd want to go there. I feel like we need to go back to, we got to draft and do some investing in that position young, and maybe draft multiple guys. And the other kind of position that I'm at there, honestly,
what? So
is
I was
running back.
Oh, you were gonna go right. I was gonna go with a different position because like you guys mentioned edge and interior defensive line. I was actually gonna say that wide receiver 1, like a dominant wide receiver 1. You know, actually, it's kind of funny. I feel like the wide receiver room compares a little bit favorably to the edge room. Like the edge room, the pass rushers are all full of basically number 2s, if you will, really like solid, number 2, like, depth players, right? It's almost like, and me and Carl have had that conversation in terms of like Shane Ray and, Shaq Barrett, but if you think back to like 2015, like they were full of really solid, like, depth pass rushers, right? With Shane Ray and Shaq Barrett, like at that time, it's almost like the wide receiver room. You're full of basically like really, really solid number 2s, or just really players who possibly could be a number 1, but just with where they're at in their careers, they sit at a number 2. And the Broncos really like they lack a dominant player. I mean, obviously Sutton had a really solid year, but I felt like that was more of a complementary of his best style to a guy like a Russell Wilson, right? Because Cortland is almost like made for that. So if you can, I'll just use a hypothetical. Say you sign a guy like a Mike Evans, right? Like you bring in a Mike Evans, here, I mean, those are the types of players that you would be looking for. I feel like ideally, though, the best course of action for you to double up or triple up obviously would have been this last year in this draft class where you did take Marvin Mims. But the other class you probably should double up if you can is this upcoming class in 2024, because I think number 12, ideally, if you can find yourself, that just wide receiver 1 that you feel is that guy, then I would absolutely take him. Because they very clearly do lack that kind of guy. They can just take over games. So I have a question, and I'm curious, Carl, to hear your analysis on this. I mean, I feel like the answer, I don't, that's why I said I don't know if I'd say answer, I'd say analysis, because I think the answer is fairly obvious in that, does Jerry Jeudy get traded? And I think the answer is yes, but I want to know, like, I just want to hear what you guys think about that, because I'm kind of with you in, would I hate it if we spent the number 12 pick on wide receiver? No.
I would hate it if they didn't have a quarterback plan.
Well, that's also fair. Let's say. So here's the thing. Go ahead. You go first.
Oh, yeah. I was just gonna say that. Unfortunately, we've seen there's so many wide receivers that are quarterback dependent. Like Cortland Sutton, he's one of the few that you could sit there and say probably any quarterback that comes in, he can do what he does. You can go throw it up to him, those 50-50 balls. He's going to come down with a lot of those. He can go be that red zone target for you. He's probably not going to be that true consistent number 1. I'd put him still at that low end number 1, because there's going to be 32 number 1 wide receivers. Obviously some teams have more than one compared to other teams, but I'd still put him up there. I think if you get him a really good quarterback, he can go have 1,000-yard season for you. And it's the same with Jerry Jeudy. I think he can still go out there and have 1,000-yard season. He was really close his rookie year, had over 900 yards with not great quarterback play. In 2022 as well. Yeah. And so I think you get him the right quarterback. I mean, we saw it in this last game where he was getting open. He can go make you a few plays. He can make some guys miss. If you get a quarterback that can hit him in stride on time, that guy can go and go crazy. And like, if he had Drew Brees, when Drew Brees was in his prime, Jerry Jeudy would be having 1,000-yard seasons every year, minus injuries. Yeah, every year. Even with his drops, he's got his problems. I don't think he's ever going to be a true number 1. He's never going to live up to that number 15 pick. I'm still going to be very upset that they didn't take CeeDee Lamb. That's just always going to be where I'm at, because I loved CeeDee Lamb. He was one of my favorite wide receivers ever in college football to watch. And took him on my fantasy team this year. He took me to the finals. Unfortunately, the other team just had a ridiculous day, and half my starters were on the bench because it was week 18. But you're a little bitter. Yeah, just a little.
Abolish the week 18 championship.
You what?
Abolish week 18 championships.
Yes. They
are illegal.
I hated that.
Go straight to jail if you schedule that.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson was my starting quarterback, and of course he sat out week 18. So I'll get off that high horse right now, but no, I think I'm willing to take a wide receiver in this draft because obviously there's some outstanding ones that can be true number ones. I mean, you got Adunze from Washington. Maybe if teams go quarterback heavy in the top 10, maybe Neighbors falls to you. I don't think so, but maybe.
John Coleman.
Troy Franklin is one of my favorite receivers from Oregon. If you guys haven't watched him, go watch that guy. It's lots of fun. Texas has a couple wide receivers that I think are underrated at this point. There's just the list could go on. I know North Carolina. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Devontae's. Shoot, why am I forgetting his last name? Oh my gosh, when he was healthy this year, that guy was special. He's got like 4.3 speed, pretty darn good hands. He struggles a little to stay healthy. That makes me a little concerned. So yeah, if Broncos go wide receiver, you're setting it up where any quarterback that comes in is going to have some best friends to go play with. And like I said, if you get that number one, Cortland Sutton all of a sudden becomes a great number 2.
Yeah.
And Marvin Mims becomes a great number 3 for you. You know, with his speed, if he gets one-on-one with teams, good luck to you. I mean, we saw it early in the season when the Broncos really took advantage of his speed deep. That was fun to watch. I wish they could have done it more. That last game, oh my gosh, that play design was perfect.
Yeah.
Where he had that perfect catch. It was right when everybody started blocking.
3rd and
for a
16,
big first down.
Yeah.
Oh man, that was one of my favorite plays of the entire season because it was just perfect timing. Everybody on the same page. It worked so great. And it's been something that's been missing all year.
The one wide receiver that you didn't say his name, but you did mention him, and he's down there in Texas, and that would be Adonai Mitchell. And it's funny because like he's one of those players. You talked about possibly how the Broncos missed out on a CeeDee Lamb. He might be, you don't want to go to that extreme, but he's got a lot of the same like catch radius as like a CeeDee Lamb. Like the ball, and again, I'll have to watch more, but the ball that he caught in, I want to say the Washington game. It was the Washington game in that corner of the end zone was like picturesque in terms of like a CeeDee Lamb type catch in the corner of the end zone. Like, so he's got like that ability. And so if you can be able to put him in there, and he's like 6'3", 6'4", he's played with like Georgia. He's been with Texas. He's obviously been, so he's been with multiple different programs. So he's one of those other like sneaky options. And of course, this is a nice little transition. The idea and maybe the best like pipe dream scenario, and that would be, Carl and Brandon, pairing one of these wide receivers with, maybe that quarterback. And I know that you mentioned Franklin from Oregon. Well, one of those quarterbacks may or may not be one of the better fits for Sean Payton. I think that I think that again, I'm curious, for you, Carl, and right, building the Broncos, I'd be kind of curious when you look at some of these quarterbacks. It feels somewhat like there are 4 or 5 quarterbacks to me that actually are really decent fits for what Sean Payton wants to do. So you have the pipe dreams, Jaden Daniels and Drake May. And, I'll lump, Caleb Williams into that just because that's the pipe dream, but he's not necessarily one of the 5. But then you go to Michael Penix Jr., where he's still a rather decent fit for what Sean Payton would want. And then you have Bo Nix, and then the wild card of the bunch, which would possibly be J.J. McCarthy, right? J.J. McCarthy, because you have no idea what if he's going to declare, how much of it is a Harbaugh decision, how much is of the fact that they just won the national championship, and so because they won the national championship, I'll move on. But it feels like to me like the Broncos actually have a decent shot, or at least Sean Payton, I should say, has a decent shot of actually getting his quarterback in this class.
Yeah, I'm interested to see if he's willing to really put his stamp and say this, like, his entire head coaching career has been with veterans. He has had one rookie play one start his entire time head coaching. And that was because of injuries. Like, he had no other way around it, kind of thing. Not saying that he wouldn't start a rookie. I'm just saying that that's not been the way he's gone. Now, he had Drew Brees, a healthy Drew Brees, for a lot of years. So he's never really had that
really
chance
good quarterback
to stay. And you're right. There's some quarterbacks that I could see fitting pretty well. I think Michael Penix, you see with his decision-making, he does a lot of pre-snap work that a lot of these other quarterbacks do not do. He's got a lot of experience. I think he's got a good enough arm. It's not the greatest arm, but it's a really good arm. His mechanics definitely are a concern. His ability to handle pressure is another concern. That's when all of his accuracy just goes out the window. You know, when he has a great pocket, has time, he is one of the better ones out there. He's also a little bit of a tougher evaluation because you could argue he had one of the top 2 or 3 wide receiver rooms in all of college football. He had a great offensive line. So some of his work was a little bit easier than other guys. Bo Nix, Bo Nix is another, he's a really tough evaluation. He sucked at Auburn. I mean, like, undraftable, should never play a snap in the NFL. That's how bad he was when he was there. And then he gets to Oregon and he looks good. I mean, his statistics look good, but he's in an offense that really makes life so easy on a quarterback. He had, I think it was 100 throws this year that were screen passes. Like, that is as easy as it gets for a quarterback.
So
you've got one guy do what?
So did Russell Wilson.
Yes, I know. Exactly. Well, yeah. And so you're going to be running a lot of those same things, but it's like, how do you evaluate that?
No, you're right.
As you throw those 100 passes out of there. So then we're looking at these others. Now he's got really accurate. He's had a lot of experience, which I think Sean Payton was going to love. I think he's got some NFL pedigree because of his family. He's got a pretty accurate arm, I'd say, and he's got a good, powerful arm. So I think there's a lot of things to really like about his game again, but I'm really hoping he goes down to the Senior Bowl, because it's kind of like
Next?
when
You're saying next?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, like, Justin Herbert had the same concerns when he was coming out, because he played in a very similar offense to what Bo Nix did. And a lot of teams are kind of like, we need to see you make these NFL decisions, get up to a line of scrimmage, actually have to read a defense, not just have this be your first read. This is where I'm going. And Justin Herbert killed it at the Senior Bowl. That's why he became a top 10 pick, or I think it was 6th or 7th over. I think it was 6th. And because of a lot of what he did at the Senior Bowl, where he answered a lot of those questions, Bo Nix is going to have to go do the same thing. If he does that, I probably don't have too much trouble taking him there at 12. Right now, I don't have him at that place. I have him as more of a second round kind of player. Penix, I have him as kind of a late first. JJ McCarthy, 3rd or 4th round, maybe, because he is, man, of all the quarterbacks, again, he had it so easy. It was, don't go lose us the game. It was pretty much what he was told before every single game. Now, he still made some really nice throws. Don't get me wrong. He's got a really strong arm. He's very athletic. He's still young, so he's got plenty of time to develop and become a great quarterback. I just think he's where the Broncos need somebody to step in and be like the guy day one. He's not at that place. He's going to need another couple years. So I don't think the Broncos will go in that kind of direction. I'm trying to think, who else did you list there?
So it was Penix, it was Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy, and of course the pipe dreams. Or depending on what situation you actually find yourself in, which is maybe it's a likely scenario that they trade up, right? Which would be guys like Jaden Daniels and Drake May. Yeah,
I mean, Drake May is the absolute pipe dream.
Yeah,
I don't think there's ever a quarterback that fit Sean Payton better. He's big, he's strong, he can make all the throws. He's smart. He doesn't make a lot of bad decisions. If he learns from his bad decisions when he does make them. He showed that he could really elevate the talent around him to be a good team. because he didn't have a ton of talent there in North Carolina. And I think he's just a good kid from everything that I've heard. So yeah, he'd be the absolute pipe dream. If he falls beyond pick number 3, I'd be making those phone calls and be like, hey, Patrick Surtain here. We're willing to trade him. I mean, really, because quarterback is just that important. And Drake May, I think, really would just change everything for this organization. He's like the one guy I'm like, okay, I'm not really willing to trade Patrick Surtain for much, but if it's for Drake May, that's the one guy I'm willing to take that chance.
So do you think there's a chance that the Broncos could trade up for Jaden Daniels and not give up Pat Surtain?
I think they'd want to. I mean, again, it depends how far they have to trade up. If it's top 3, then you're probably having to give up Patrick Surtain just because you don't have the draft picks to go trade up that far. I mean, you think about the 49ers and what they had to give up to go from 12 to 3. I think it was 3 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and something else. And, I mean, the Broncos could give up 3 first-round picks, but because, again, they don't have those second-round picks to kind of help with that, they're in trouble that way. So I don't see them being able to do that. I think you'd have to give up Surtain because he's your most valuable piece. I do think they could maybe get a second-round pick, and I know some people are going to push back against this, but Garrett Bowles.
Yeah.
From what I've been told, Broncos have talked to him about a contract extension, and he has said no. Now they came in low. Don't get me wrong. Part of it could be just that the money wasn't high enough, but I've also kind of heard that he's tired of losing and wants to go to a team that can win. And I think he's a little tired of some of the things going on with the Broncos. He's a very emotional guy, and there's nothing wrong with that, but he takes everything very personal when things happen. The Russell Wilson benching, there are some players that were not happy about that. And I think he was one of those.
Yeah.
And again, some of the coaching hires that they've made, he's not been very happy about some of them throughout the years because he's been here for a while. So it wouldn't surprise me if Garrett Bowles is just like, you know what, I'm ready to go move on somewhere else. And the Broncos are like, hey, we can get a second-round pick for you because you're a position of value.
You have some decent
and you
money.
had a really good year. So I do think that they could do that, and that could maybe help out with those trades to move up.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that concerns me is like you look at the order, and I think it's all about do the Bears keep do the Bears draft a quarterback, or do they keep Justin Fields? And then also, does Arizona keep Kyler Murray or not? Because other than that, I mean, first pick, Chicago, like quarterback. Washington, quarterback. New England, quarterback. Arizona, quarterback. Like, you don't get to a team where you're saying there's no way this team is taking a quarterback until pick 5.
Yeah.
There's some teams that's like, maybe they don't take a quarterback.
Atlanta.
I think
Atlanta,
4
Tennessee.
quarterbacks go in the top 4? No, but I'm just saying, like, I would be surprised if it goes immediately. It goes Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and then everyone else. Like, you're gonna have to go high. And the thing is, if we didn't have that winning streak, probably have a much better shot at getting Drake May. I'm just gonna say it. I enjoyed it as much as everyone, but
yeah.
I remember. So I went to the Packers game,
right?
And you were there too. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So it was. I mean, I remember talking about this before the game. Somebody was like, "Do you hope the Broncos win?" And I was kind of going, to me, this is kind of a win-win. If they win, that's great. Like, I get to celebrate a victory. If they lose, they're that much closer to the first pick and getting their quarterback. And so I was like, I'm trying to look at this as a win-win situation for the Broncos. And unfortunately, they kind of ended where you hope they didn't, where it's out of the top 5 picks because now you're right. And so now all of a sudden you're having to give up major picks if you're trying to get up there to get your quarterback, which is going to hurt your depth of your team to build around that quarterback. And to me, that's always been one of the biggest issues that teams have done is, if you don't put enough talent around that player, you're never going to maximize what they can bring to the table. Sam Darnold. I was a big Sam Darnold fan, but the Jets broke him. I will say that to my dying day. One, you gave him Adam Gase as his head coach, which was not a great thing. And then he had no weapons. He had no offensive line. I mean, he was just taking hit after hit. The quarterback that I know that I will say I think could have had a Hall of Fame career that really turned into a bust is David Carr. Not Derek Carr, David Carr, his older brother. He went to Houston as that number 1 overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
I loved him. If you go back and watch his college games, you're just like, this kid is special.
Yeah.
And then he goes to Houston, who doesn't have anything for him. And he just gets destroyed. I mean, just hit after hit. And then all of a sudden he's not a great player. But I've seen him even after he's retired. Like he works with NFL Network. And they'll have him compete against like Hall of Fame level quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes in throwing competitions. And he's hanging with those guys. Even now when he's retired in his 40s. And he's sitting there throwing just as well as them. He had an accuracy competition against Dak Prescott. He whooped him. And I'm just going, man, that guy, if he went to a decent situation, what he could have turned into.
Another one of those players that probably could have turned into something if he didn't transfer to 7 schools. JT Daniels, right, Carl?
Okay, I was a little wrong on that one.
I had to throw that in.
I know. That kid. I loved him in high school. Loved watching his high school tape. But college, he proved he didn't quite have the talent to compete at that next place.
It's an inside joke, obviously, with Carl and I. But he was able to throw to former a Nebraska quarterback, now wide receiver down there at Rice, Luke McCaffrey, who I guess turned himself into a pretty solid wide receiver down there. It's going to be. I'm really curious to see how things transpire, and we've had the quarterback conversation, and it's been rather dominant, if you will, the last couple weeks, because that's just a thing that it's been, in terms of Russ's benching, and then of course how well will Jarrett Stidham play. The other quarterback I do want to throw in, and we did mention his name, but I feel like, and I don't know if it would work, but I feel like he's a fascinating one. And obviously the Broncos are probably going to have a conversation one way or another, and that is with the Chicago Bears regarding the number 1 overall pick and Justin Fields. Because I feel like Justin Fields may be one of the how do I say it? Maybe one of the cheaper options, and this is a conversation Brandon and I have had numerous times, but it's one of the cheaper options probably, but also it will allow you the opportunity to not just trade for Fields, but keep your first round pick and get him another number 1 wide receiver, possibly for trading up, trading, or even not just trading, but for Fields, but getting in number 1 wide receiver. So I think it allows that flexibility for you. And I'm curious what his fit would be with Peyton, right? And Carl, you and I talked about obviously within the Surtain year, but it's like, I'm curious what Sean Payton would do with him. Because like, I feel like, he's a guy, like if you go look like truly, and I'd love to know what your answer on this, because I've been curious of it. Justin Fields, when he was with Ohio State, like that was, at least from what you see from the quarterbacks that have played there, a structured offense, right? Guys like Cardale Jones, Dwayne Haskins, obviously CJ Stroud has come from there. Justin Fields came from there. But then he goes to the pros, and Luke Getsy, or I should say the now fired Luke Getsy, makes it into almost like an out of structure offense where he almost turns him into Lamar Jackson, right? As far as a just nothing but running quarterback, which, I mean, it was pretty evident his athleticism coming out of the draft was very underrated, right? Like was very underrated, and actually became, a much more useful trait to him, right? It's almost like you're in college and the minor became more useful than your major, right? But I'd be curious, like, do you feel like Sean Payton could use him in a way that best molds both what he had structurally at Ohio State to what he also had with Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, so I'd say there's maybe 5 coaches out there that they can take a good quarterback and make them great. Like they move a quarterback up a level, whoever they bring in. Like you bring in an average guy, he takes them to the above average level. I think Sean Payton is one of those guys. Obviously Andy Reid is up there. I'm trying to think. McVay would be up there. Who else would I?
Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, Shanahan would be another one. So like I said, there's about 4 or 5 guys that I would say can do that. So I think he would definitely maximize Justin Fields. Now, what is a maximized Justin Fields? I was a huge fan of his coming out. I had him as the number 2 quarterback in that draft. I think if you watched our stream, because we do a live stream throughout the draft, I had to turn off my screen for a second because I was in the background saying some not so nice words. Now, I like Patrick Surtain, and don't get me wrong. I thought he was worthy of the pick,
right.
And he's obviously proven that he is worthy of that pick. But it's just one of those things where you keep pushing the quarterback situation further and further down the road, and all you're doing is wasting any kind of talent you might even have on your roster. So I was willing to take that chance on Justin Fields. Plus, it would have negated then having to trade for Russell Wilson and then having to give Russell Wilson this big contract. So there's some domino effects by not taking Justin Fields in that draft. Even if he didn't turn into a good player, you're not giving up all these draft picks and money. But no, I think Justin Fields at his best could maybe be right in there in that like top 12 quarterback conversation. I don't think he's going to ever be elite by any means. There's some things still missing from his game. There's still times where you can see processing wise, he's a little bit off, where I think Peyton would help with some of that, but it's still going to be a problem. I'd worry a little bit about his injury history now, because last few years he's had to miss some games, in part because Chicago's just made him run.
Yeah.
Like they've just put him in some really bad situations.
Mm-hmm.
They've not had a great offensive line always around him. But we did see his game get elevated. All of a sudden they gave him a true number 1, DJ Moore. And hey, again, another guy on my fantasy team had a good season for me. So that was good to see. But yeah, I think Justin Fields, I think he'd be okay. I don't think he'd be a perfect fit with what Sean Payton's wanting, but it'd kind of be a little bit the same with, like, if they took Jaden Daniels. There's going to be some parts to his game that are going to drive Sean Payton crazy, where he's going to miss some guys because he's going to be pulling the ball down, wanting to take off running, instead of keeping his eyes down the field, seeing somebody open. Not saying that the off-script stuff, that's still important. You have to have that in the NFL in today's game. But just being able to stay on script, Justin Fields is going to miss a few things. But if you're only having to trade
a second or even a third.
Well, let's say we trade Garrett Bowles, get a second-round pick, and then you use that to trade for Justin Fields. I feel like I'd be okay with that.
Yeah,
I could get on board. If all these other quarterbacks are gone, you don't have a chance to go get them in the draft. I'm looking at free agency. There's not anybody in free agency that's making me go, all right, this is the guy that's taking the Broncos to the playoffs. There isn't that guy. So I feel like Justin Fields is worth at least a risk.
You call up, someone else in the top 5 besides the Chargers, and their asking price is too high.
And it's also the Chargers. And are they really going to help you?
That's why I said other than the Chargers.
Yeah.
Like they're not going to know. I said top 5 other than the Chargers.
But still, though,
and their asking price is too high. And that'd be the top 3, honestly. Or Arizona, maybe. But yeah, I mean, I'm torn because the other thing, like, I don't think that when you think about who's the ideal quarterback for Sean Payton, like, it's not Justin Fields. That's not the kind of quarterback that he likes. Would you rather have Justin Fields or JJ McCarthy? You trade a second-round pick for Justin Fields, or you take JJ McCarthy? Let's say you trade down and then take him. Like, I don't even know if you take him in the first. Like, I don't even know if I would take him first round. But let's say that's what you do.
Right.
Or Michael Penix.
But it just feels like, well,
I just don't.
But Penix is a very different quarterback than Fields. Like,
no, I know. I'm just saying, like, if your options are take one of the, second tier guys,
yeah,
or trade a second round pick for a guy that can be a serviceable starter that Sean Payton can elevate. I just don't know. But is a serviceable starter enough in this division? I mean, this year it probably would have been. With the way the Chiefs looked and the Chargers existing, and it's a hard decision.
Let me say this: if they had,
I will say I trust Sean Payton. If we go trade for Justin Fields because Sean Payton wanted him, I'm in.
Well, I think that would also
if we take Michael Penix and Sean Payton wants him, I'm in. Go ahead.
Yeah,
I think that would also tell me too that maybe Sean Payton has learned a thing or two, because I think that's the other wrinkle of this. I mean, I think it's very easy to go off of possibly with what he's had in the past, right? Like the Drew Brees, possibly like the Michael Penixes, the Bo Nixes.
Offense has evolved though, so you never know.
But right, so that's what I'm saying. Like it's certainly possible that he could fall in love with a Jaden Daniels, which thus would result in, hey, I'll go to actually take and actually work with this Justin Fields kid who is the more seasoned. He's already in the league. I'll work with him. He's still younger too. Because I mean, I mentioned it to you before. It's like it's way easier to tell a 26-year-old quarterback to be a structured quarterback than it is a 35-year-old quarterback. And in terms of with what Sean had to offer, it's way easier to tell a quarterback like that, to be that. And plus, I would imagine, in terms of how successful Justin Fields had been in Ohio State too, I'm guessing he would be okay with that too. Like I'm guessing he would be okay with that. The question is just, how successful would he be too? How successful would he be?
Let me ask you guys this question. Do you think that do you think he stays their quarterback?
I don't.
Because I was torn until they fired their entire offensive staff. I just can't see a scenario where they give him yet another offensive coordinator.
I guess
I don't know. I was a little bit
more. Well, the fact they kept his head coach.
They kept his head coach, though, yeah. I mean, not that the offensive coordinator was good. It just seems like they'd want some consistency on the offensive side. They kept, should he have kept his job? I don't know. But they did keep him.
That's a conversation for another day.
Yeah. And I just, it's as a head coach that you were almost fired this year. Do you really want to put your fate in the hands of a rookie? Because if you have another year that you struggle, where Justin Fields, he went out there, played pretty darn good to close out the season for you. They won some games. I don't know. I'm torn on which direction they go. It wouldn't surprise me either way. Like I said, I'm hoping as a Bronco person, I'm hoping they stick with Justin Fields, because then that really changes the entire top of this draft when it comes to quarterbacks and how teams attack that. Right. Obviously the more teams that keep their quarterback and say, hey, I think this could be our guy.
If they keep Justin Fields and Arizona keeps Kyler Murray, different.
Which is still very possible.
You could all of a sudden be talking where the Broncos would be trading up for a Jaden Daniels. And while I don't think Jaden Daniels is the perfect fit with Sean Payton, one thing I have loved about Sean Payton is he does build his offense around his quarterback. Like if 100%. You're good at this, I'm going to try to do that with Russell Wilson. He tried to build in, screen passes. That's what you need to get a few things going.
Yeah.
The deep passes, we're going to try to build those into this system. We're going to let you run around. We're going to try to get you to the edge. So he tried. It just was a losing battle, unfortunately. Russell Wilson was just so limited, and you couldn't really with him, you just can't design an offense because so much of it is off script.
It's street ball.
How do you write a script for somebody that doesn't ever go by the script?
Yeah.
It's impossible to do.
His best script is off script, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so as a offensive coordinator, and that's what you saw in Seattle. A bunch of offensive coordinators kept getting fired because it was kind of one of those, well, Wilson's winning us a lot of games and he's putting up these big stats for us. It must be the offensive coordinator. That's the problem. Why we have sometimes these inconsistencies on offense. And Jay Cutler kind of had a little bit of the same thing where he kept getting coaches fired because everybody's like, he's so talented. Sometimes it is actually the talent that isn't always lining up perfectly. Now they're still talented. Like Russell Wilson still had a decent year this year, just not good enough and not a great match with him. But Jaden Daniels, I do think Sean Payton is looking for a little more athleticism, which is why maybe he leans away from like a Michael Penix because he's not a great athlete.
Right.
In the past, if we're like 15 years ago,
He'd be
maybe
going.
Michael Penix would be his kind of guy. Maybe not now. I can see
given what we've seen with Breeze, exactly. Yeah,
right. But I think he does want a little bit more of the off-script ability. He doesn't want it to be the offense, but a part of the offense. And so that's why I've had some of my people at Mile High Huddle have pushed against this. They don't think Bo Nix is a great quarterback and doesn't think that he's a great fit with Sean Payton. But I see a little bit more. I'm kind of like, oh, I could see it.
Yeah,
I think he's one of those guys. A coach tells him do this, he does that. Sean Payton's going to love that. Yeah, and he's got enough athleticism to go to make some plays with his feet. I think he'd be okay.
I tweeted a little bit of my comparison last night in a meme, but he reminds me a little bit of Brock Purdy. Like, I mean, with what he can offer, like you put him in an offense, he will do what that offense asks, of you. He's also, I think, he's younger too, so that certainly helps. But I think that he's also slightly more athletic than Purdy, but I think Purdy is also a much, much better athlete than people give him credit for. So I think too, like, and plus there's at least a scenario where you can possibly, and I mean, I will say it's probably this way too, maybe with Penix, depending on the evaluation of him, where you could work with a Dunze and Penix again, depending on how you operate it, with the draft and everything. But you could work out where you could get Franklin and Nix again, and pair him, and pair him. And plus, we know, like, and again, I don't know if the Broncos are going to be leaning this way, but it's like Alex Forsyth was his center in 2022, so like he would in essence be coming into a favorable situation, and that's if Forsyth is your starting center. Like, and if Forsyth is your starting center, he's already comfortable with him. The Broncos clearly love him. George Payton loves him. Sean Payton drafted him, even if it was the 7th round, they drafted him for a reason. A lot of draft scouts love Alex Forsyth and felt like he wasn't a 7th rounder. So yeah, I think there's absolutely a scenario where Bo Nix could end up being the guy for them.
Yeah, I've heard the coaching staff loves him. Zach Strife, the offensive line coach, loves Forsyth. They think he's not the greatest athlete by any means, but center, you don't have to be a great athlete to be a great player. If you're smart, you can be a great center in this league. You don't have to be strong, because a lot of times you're more of the double team guy, where you're helping one guy then moving to the next level, or you're helping him and then helping that other guy move to the next level. So I think he could be a really successful player in this offense. It's going to be interesting to see the battle between him and Wattenberg of who's going to be that next starting center. It's nice to have an actual competition. And I think Wattenberg, when he did play a little bit this year, he didn't look terrible.
Yeah.
So like I said, I think that'll be, I'm not too worried about the center position. I really don't see Lloyd Cushenberry back. He's going to cost too much. Some team's going to overpay for what he did this last year. But yeah, I could see a scenario where Bo Nix is the kind of guy to come here to Denver. Yeah. I don't think he's ever going to be a top 5 guy by any means. I just don't think he's quite that kind of talent. But again, I don't think for Sean Payton to function as a head coach and offensive coordinator kind of thing, he doesn't quite need that.
No.
Drew Brees was not that when he came to the Saints.
He grew into that too. Like
he did.
Yeah.
There's a reason the Chargers cut him. There's a reason that they went and got Phillip Rivers, because they saw Drew Brees was not doing enough.
Right.
And there wasn't any there. Miami talked to him a little bit, but even there, they wanted some injury guarantees built into the contract, and he didn't want that. And we got Biggie Broncos saying Bo Nix is the Kirk Cousins. I could see that. I think there's not similarities to their game, because there's quite a few differences to them, but I could see that kind of level of play. And Kirk Cousins, I think he's one of the more underrated quarterbacks in the league. Everybody kind of poo-poos on him for the team's not always winning. And of course, some of his antics of you like that. Yeah. He's a fun guy. I really do. There's times where I really wish he was with the Denver Broncos.
There was a time.
I know it was close. But it's one of those where if you build a decent team enough around them, they can go win a lot of games. And Bo Nix on a rookie contract, you can go win a lot of games because you can build a decent team around him. So I'm not completely against it. Bo Nix is definitely not my favorite quarterback in this draft, but I'd be okay with it.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, Carl, thank you so much, man, for hopping on with us. I love talking shop with you, and it feels like it's been a little bit, and, it feels like it's been quite a little bit since, obviously, you and I've actually even texted back and forth, but yeah, I mean, obviously, we love having you on. And again, this has been a while. Like it's been good. Actually, the last time I saw you was that Packers game. It wasn't quite a podcast, but the last time I saw you was that Packers game. You are definitely, shorter than me, right? I mean, your beard gives you a bit more, a height advantage, I should say. But yeah, it was great having you on, man. It was great having you on.
Yeah. No, thank you guys for having me. It's been fun talking and getting to see some of the people here in the chat. Always good to see that. And Brandon, man, it's been a great conversation with you as well. And love the background. Some spam. I might have to go and eat some here.
Cam on the spam. Yeah.
That's
you're giving me the beard jealousy though. So
I said he's got the best beard in the Broncos.
Yeah, I wasn't complaining. It's a compliment.
I've had that said a few times around here. No, I've been blessed with this beard since I was like 13 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's unfortunately that's one of those people.
I feel like we have the evolution. You got Cam.
Yeah.
Then you got me. I'm the middle child. Then you got you.
Right. We just need a mic, or we need Mundungus to come in here. We'll have all four covered.
Yeah.
But why don't you tell our listeners what you and another buddy of mine, of course, Nick, down there with Building the Broncos. What do you guys got cooking over there?
Yeah, so we're over there on Building the Broncos. We do our show on Tuesday evenings with Mile High Huddle, and of course we got articles that we publish there as well. But always enjoy doing live shows, and off season is our time to shine. This is what we love. It's why we started our show like 7 years ago. Was the Garrett Bowles draft actually was our first draft that we did together.
Our first group chat too. Yeah.
And so we especially love the draft. I mean, I could talk the draft all day, every day, if you let me. My wife gets really tired of me and talking about it. And she's like, "Oh, why are you talking about this player again?" Because I watched their tape today. But no, it's like I said, we have fun with it. Off season, fun time. I know not everybody gets into it, but if you ever want to come listen and see what our thoughts are, you can tune in over there. But again, thank you guys for having me on here. Really enjoyed this, and it's been a lot of fun.
It's been great. They actually have still, maybe to this day, one of the best. It changed, by the way, right? It changed, but they had one of the best podcasts, like actual pictures, for their podcast, and it was the actual picture of Step Brothers with Nick and Carl. Like it was.
I remember that actually.
Yeah,
it was the greatest. It was the greatest podcast picture that I can remember. So I mean, I certainly like, Manely Broncos. I like the OG, Manely Broncos logo, but I mean, I'll tell you, that is certainly one of the greatest, podcast pictures that I can recall. I'll never forget when Carl and Nick dropped that in the group chat that we have with Sayer, and yeah, me and Sayer's reactions were just priceless. But Carl, thank you so much, man. For having hop on with us, and we'll definitely do it again. And maybe this time, I feel like, because we either have you on or we have Nick on at some point, and with it being the off season, I don't know about you, but I feel like maybe we should do a Building the Broncos, Manely Broncos crossover with you and Nick to complete it, so we can, talk about actually the appropriate way to build the Broncos. I don't know how do you feel about that?
Yeah. No, that'd be great. I know Nick right now is a little busy.
Congratulations.
Just had himself a little one. And so his first child, he's going through all the emotions of up and down, and wishing him the best. He texted me on Tuesday. He's like, "Carl, I don't think I can do our show today. I gotta be with my family." And I'm like, "Dude, I know you got to be that." So it'd be great to get us all together and just talk some Broncos shop,
Be
and
fun.
maybe as we get closer to the draft, especially, that'd be a fun one.
You know,
I have two requests. I have two requests here. We have to call
Yes.
it Building the Main, and the
Ooh.
order has to go because I'm like, I don't think I've seen Nick with like a full-on beard. It would need to go like clean shaven to Cam, to me, to you. It has to be that order,
Okay.
and it's Building the Main. Those are my two requests.
Okay, I kind of see where he's going with it, and Carl, will be great as we do a mock draft every year, or a couple mock drafts every year, and now we've decided to kind of do somewhat of a live stream mock draft. So maybe that's kind of like how we do it. Is we do a mock draft, live stream. That'd be a lot of fun. But anyway, Carl, it's awesome. I absolutely love you, buddy. And obviously, I don't know if this is the first time you've heard about this, but Brandon over here is a golfer too. So whenever
Not good, but I golf.
So when you decide to get your butt actually out here, we can actually hit the links and play some golf.
I know. Oh, Dalton Reisner killed it for us. A jerk.
He did.
We were going to do a golf tournament together. Dalton
Yeah.
Reisner is doing some big fundraiser.
That's right.
And so Cam and I were all signed up, ready to go. And then he canceled the tournament.
That's so. I never heard that story.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah.
Where was it at?
We've cut. It was in Wiggins, wasn't it? Like it was actually.
I think
Like
it
his
was
hometown?
at his, yeah.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Sweet. Man, I miss golf. So
Me too.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
looking at it like a foot of snow
I
outside
said-
my house right now.
Oh, it's supposed to be negative 20 degrees next Tuesday. I'm
Yeah,
losing
but-
my mind. I have a buddy of mine who's like my go-to golf. This is devolving into totally off topic, but it's like my go-to golf partner. And like, you guys know that picture of the guy who's like clearly an addict. It's like, y'all got any more of that? Today I sent him you got any more of that golf meme? And he was like, bro, I can't wait.
Yeah. I feel like I actually feel like a actual like football player. Like what? Like I feel like at this point, like with Instagram, like I feel like in the Instagram reels of like the golf influencers, I'm watching like golf tape every once in a while. Like, okay, I can get better at like this. I can get better at that. Or then I'm watching like a very bizarre golf tip, and I'm like, wait, he's using a toilet paper on a golf club. This is actually useful. How is he doing this? Like, this feels very absurd. So yeah, I'm definitely still very much into golf mode. So yeah,
The
Carl.
FBI agent on my computer is listening in on this conversation because I have Bo Nick's tape playing on this monitor, and I just got a golf ad. That's concerning.
Uh-oh.
That is
Now you're
very
in trouble.
concerning. Yeah. Well, anyway,
America.
for Carl, for Brandon, and myself, make sure you follow Carl. His Twitter handle is right there at Carl Dummler MHH. For Brandon Miller PO, myself at Cameron Parker PO. It's been an absolute blast. Thank you guys so much for hopping on with us for another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Tempo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out.